Dear listeners, we present to you the full version of the story that you enjoyed. The phone rang non-stop. The rattling sound of it still pulled me out of the clammy embrace of sleep. I sat up on the bed and looked at the machine. I still hoped that someone had got the wrong number, but the phone rang repeatedly, and finally, I picked up the receiver. I'm listening. Dima, the manager of the Bronze Age Club, where I worked part-time on weekends, called. Yeah. Is there a problem? Not really. There's a man looking for you. There's an entrepreneur. Really wants you and the guys to play at his anniversary party. One section. He's a 70s rock and roll fan. Says he'll pay good money. Where are they celebrating? Out of time. The Old Castle Motel. Can you make it? My wife's out of town, visiting her parents, and won't be back for a while. My daughter's staying with my parents. I'm alone now, so in principle, why not? You can always use the money. What time should we arrive? He said 7 p.m. Alright, I'll be there. They hung up on me on the other end. I turned on the record player and put on a Chuck Berry recording. Women are bloodthirsty cats, but it's awfully boring without them. Chuck assured me. Then I poured myself a whiskey. No sooner had I drank than the doorbell rang. Without dressing, I went to the door and looked through the peephole. There was a messenger in uniform. In his hands, he was holding an envelope. When I opened the door, he handed it to me without even asking my name, and turning around, began to go down the stairs. I locked the door and went into the kitchen. I poured the ground Italian coffee into a clay pot, added water, and put it on the stove. Then opened the envelope. Okay, a brightly decorated card and a small bundle of neatly folded green dollars. I counted it exactly 500. The card had invitation written in gold on a red background. Inside was handwritten, "This is the deposit. That's twice the fee. I'll see you at the Old Castle Motel at 7 p.m. and the date." I shrugged. $1.50 for one department wasn't bad at all. Just with a cup of coffee in hand. I returned to the room, changed the record, and settled into a chair. A Peggy Lee song from her latest album came on from the 4 speakers on my record player. I listened to the song and drank my coffee, admiring the collection of vintage guitars hanging on the wall. I had a lot to think about. Svetlana and I had lived with her. I lived for 15 years. I was already in my 30s when I met her at an anniversary party. I was playing with the guys that night, providing musical accompaniment, and Svetlana was among the guests. She stood out noticeably in the faceless crowd of munching and drinking guests. Svetlana was 3 years younger than me. She rented a room in a bedroom community. We sat in the car for a long time, and I finally worked up the courage and kissed her. She didn't resist, and then I suggested we go back to my place. We drank some wine, listened to music, and moved on to more serious physical exercise. So she came into my life. Sveta had a very valuable quality. She knew how to be in the right place at the right time. And soon I could not imagine my life without her. We dated for about 3 months, and came to the conclusion that we should get married. We got married in September. We didn't exactly splurge. Friends, parents, and close family. 3 years later, our daughter was born. I worked as an engineer in a factory, and on weekends I played in a cozy little club, the Bronze Age. I managed in my youth, studying at the Mechanical Engineering Institute, to finish music school at the same time, and now music helped me to survive. I put together a small band, and we played rock and roll of the 70s. It turned out that there were a lot of fans of that kind of music in our town, and on weekends the club was full of old rockers. They listened to covers of forgotten bands with pleasure, drinking their nostalgia away with strong drinks. Sveta was a landscaper. She designed plots for wealthy clients who had no desire to do it themselves. But over time, she became quite famous and in demand. Along with fame, the number and duration of business trips increased. But I was confident in my wife. In all the years of our life together, she never gave any reason to doubt her love and faithfulness. Our family's standard of living was above average. There was enough money to live and have fun, like any self-respecting man. I had a stash. A week ago, I learned that the owners were going to live abroad and urgently wanted to sell the Bronze Age Club at a fairly low price. I didn't hesitate to borrow money from my parents, took a loan from the bank with my father's help, added everything I had, and bought it back. I registered the purchase in my father's name. He was a pensioner and had significant tax benefits. Svetlana knew nothing about it. I decided to wait for her and celebrate our purchase. At the same time, to consult with my wife on what to do next, leave work at the plant and work closely involved in the club, or continue to try to sit on 2 chairs. After lunch, I called the guys and asked them to come. Asked them to come to the motel a little earlier to set up and check the equipment. Then I called my wife, but her phone was off. Okay, I'll call her back later. I guess it's dead. I changed my clothes. I put on a light, dark blue shirt, jeans, and light, high-heeled cowboy boots. A 70s rocker's dream. Checked my guitar chords and microphone. I try to work with my gear to rule out any surprises. At 6:45 o'clock, I was already sitting in the car and pulling out of the yard. I knew the way and planned to arrive on time. I barely parked in the parking lot, which was packed with expensive cars, and took my tools and my bag of cords and went to the entrance of the motel. The doorman at the entrance quickly opened the door, saying that the Jubilee had asked for me several times. Booking up to the stage, I made sure the guys had everything hooked up, and we were ready to start. A young man in a fancy suit came up to me. "Hi, I'm the host. You go first. How'd I announce you?" "So announce you. The band Ricochet, actually music of the Bronze Age. We'll take it from here." The young man made a note in his notebook and instantly disappeared. He was immediately replaced by another. "Paul asks you to approach him." I approached a small group of men sitting imposingly. One of them stood up and extended his hand to me. "Hello, Dimitri. Thank you for coming. I'm waiting for my friend. And I'm going to ask you to play Autumn by Vladimir Ekshon as we enter the hall. It's her favorite song. It's not just hers. My Svetka's also mollycoddling that theme. I saw it. Well, and then you play according to your program. Finish the Jubilee. But do not worry, everything will be done properly." I nodded my head and went back up on stage. "You guys play Autumn first, then Roomba and the rest." I picked up my guitar and fixed the mic. Suddenly everyone was quiet and turned toward the entrance. The Jubilee man was walking in, leading a blonde young woman in a gorgeous purple dress tailored precisely to her figure. How great the couple looked. And at that moment I recognized my wife and the Jubilee's companion. My fingers played the intro by themselves, and I began to sing. "Autumn, autumn, autumn, Icing autumn. There's a summer somewhere, but it's not there anymore, there's no more. No more, no more." My voice was distorted, and Sveta didn't recognize it. The guests looked at them and began to sit down. I finished singing, and there was silence in the room. Ancient stack de Reese. The Jubilee's voice was amplified by the microphone in his hand. "It's been a year now that we are together. Today my beloved woman has agreed to become my wife." He took a blue box from the table and pulled out a ring. Judging by the way it gleamed in the reflected light, there were plenty of diamonds. "In honor of this occasion, accept, my love, this gift." He put it on the ring finger of Sveta's right hand. He says on the same finger, until recently she had worn my wedding ring. And apparently, Pavel decided to combine 2 events, his 60th birthday and his engagement. Sveta stood up and kissed her future husband on the lips. The guests applauded. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. This is just a dream. Now I would wake up and it would all disappear. I even closed my eyes. Alas, the Jubilee continued. What should I do? Go over there and punch the Jubilee guy in the face. That's stupid. It's not like he had anything to do with it. What will he achieve? I'll be thrown out and that's it. Giving Sveta a shameless punch in the face. The ending is exactly the same. Alright, I'll see this show through to the end. The host came up to the stage. Gentlemen, our guest Risoche with a program music of the Bronze Age. The lights were dimmed and a spotlight illuminated the front stage. And then Sveta recognized me. I could clearly see her hand pressed against her throat. Her companion leaned toward her and then said something to the waiter. A few seconds later, the waiter brought a glass of water. Yes, it looks like the bride is not well. We played the part. All the while, Sveta did not take her eyes off the stage. She tried to get up several times, but then sat down again. Her date wouldn't leave her side, hovering, so to speak, like a fly over a turd. When we finished to the applause of the guests and began to gather the equipment, the presenter handed me an envelope of money. Pavel is very pleased. He'll be in touch with you again. Well, that's unlikely. I threw my guitar on my shoulder and approached Savlena. She was sitting alone. Her companion went out somewhere. Seeing me, his wife lowered her eyes. I threw my wedding ring into the glass of champagne in front of her, then I turned, picked up my bag and went to the exit. The car started with half a turn. The engine rumbled quietly. Sveta, how could you? Inside me poured a cold emptiness, pouring raging emotions. I slowly backed up, turned around, and drove out into an empty highway. In the distance, a huge city sparkled with multicolored advertising lights. Hitting on a rainy gray day in the fall, a deer rode through town. Very topical lines. Right on the money. True, it's late night instead of day, and it's spring instead of fall, but it doesn't change the point. How long have they been together? Last year. All that time my wife pretended, lied to me, lived 2 families, and in the end married her lover. Well, Sete, the landscape designer. Apparently Pavel liked my wife's landscaping so much that he's going to marry her. I wonder if he knows that his girlfriend is married with a child. I thought about my daughter and my heart ached. What will happen to Shania? How will she survive all this? These thoughts made my head hurt. Okay, enough of the snot. What happened is what happened. We must solve problems as they arise. Barely had I crossed the threshold of my apartment as the cell phone beeped. Demo, my wife's voice brought me back to reality. Are you home? I was silent. Hello? Diamond. My wife was already shouting. Can you hear me? Don't yell. I can hear you. Dima, we need to talk. Can I come in the morning? Sveta's voice had a begging tone. I turned off the phone. I'd come. Sete will talk. About what? About her lies, about duplicity, about betrayal. I honestly did not understand why it all came out that way. What was she missing? All these years I loved her. Maybe not the hysterical fake love, but the real with sincere feelings, which is alien to show off and play for the audience. Where did I make a mistake? How did I offend my wife? After all, Svetlana was not denied anything. Despite the fact that we did not have a lot of money, I did everything for my beloved in what she did not need. Yes, and she understood it. At least it seemed so to me. I remembered how Sita persuaded me to have another child, saying Xenia may be alone at some point because we are not eternal. We discussed the pros and cons for a long time, and we came to the conclusion that the second child is necessary. And at the same time, my wife was cheating with another man. I had a terrible headache. My heart wasn't pounding anymore, it was thundering, periodically sinking down somewhere. I wanted to call my daughter, but I realized in time. It was late, why rouse the child? Alright, we'll live till morning. I hardly slept that night. My heart felt in my throat and in my stomach, and I even thought of calling an ambulance. Around 9 in the morning, I heard the click of the front door and realized that Sveta had arrived. I knew what I did was mean, but I had fallen in love for real. My wife began her monologue. I can't help it. This feeling is stronger than me. I listened to her in silence and looked out of the window. It was snowing, which was quite typical for the beginning of March. It smelled cold, and I stood up and closed the window. I had made up my mind. I'm to win her back, to fight for my love, for my family. But I couldn't imagine us together anymore. At some point I suddenly realized that Sveta was just unpleasant to me. Living with a cheating, betrayed woman, it's almost the same as licking an ashtray with someone else's butts. I even shuddered in disgust. You've done so much for me for our family. I appreciate it, but I cannot help it. Svetlana continued her monologue. I got the impression that she had memorized these common phrases. Sveta, do not waste your time. I understood all about love, and that it is stronger than you. I interrupted her outpouring. I just have one question. What about Genya? Will you take her to her new father? Svetlana was silent, then looked at me pitifully. I would like that Genya would stay with you. We are going with Pasha to Italy. He has a villa there, and she has a school here, her friends. I would not want to disrupt her place. Let her finish school. Sveta lowered her eyes so as not to meet me. Everything is clear. Beloved is not burning desire to see another man's child near him. And for the sake of this jerk, to give up his own daughter. It's Sveta, what passion does to a man. Just yesterday, you were a loving mother and model wife. Okay, husband, a stranger. In fact, a potential enemy, as some loving wives say. But your daughter, your own blood, how can you do this to her? Are you going to pick up your things? I realized it was time to end the conversation. No, I want to start my life all over again, leaving nothing behind. Wow, how beautifully said. Apparently I and my daughter are also in the category of old things. Well, fair wind. They separated us quickly without asking too many questions, leaving the court building and seeing as my ex-wife kissed her Pasha and sat down in the car. I thought that at that moment I was losing a part of my soul. Instant worst. Genya calmly, without any emotion, perceived the departure of mother to another man. I expected hysterics, crying, some kind of lamentation. but she just looked at me with eyes full of tears and said, "Daddy, I ask only one thing. Let us remember it for the rest of our lives. The rest of our lives that we will never forgive her." That same evening, my daughter collected all of our family photos with Savlana in the house and threw them down the garbage chute. Years passed. I quit my job and devoted myself completely to the club. My idea of vintage rock and roll paid off. In half a year, the club was already making money. I took Natasha, a pretty young woman just over 30 with good business acumen, as an administrator. After a while, she suggested inviting the famous rock bands of the past to us. But here, there was a problem. Our room was small and could not accommodate all comers. I thought about the pros and cons and decided to buy the whole building where the club was. On the first floor, to make a decent concert hall, and in the basement to open a restaurant with a small stage on which to perform myself. I took a loan from a bank and invested the money I had saved in 6 months to implement my decision. Soon, my home collection of vintage guitars moved into the club, giving the interior a proper vintage feel. It was on the second floor. I was going to make a small office and a studio apartment for myself. I intended to give my apartment to my daughter. Gradually, the pain of my wife's betrayal dulled and the time came when I stopped remembering Sveta. I was no longer interested in where she was or what happened to her. I tried to enjoy the seemingly insignificant things. First, once of a long time ago, as a child, my mother had insured me for $500 until I came of age. And when it was time to get insurance, my mother told me that I could buy whatever I wanted. At that time, my deepest desire was to play in an ensemble. But alas, naturally, I wanted a guitar. My mom and I went to a department store and I bought an electric guitar. That's where my career as a musician began. Then we had all kinds of instruments. But I cherished my first guitar very much. But alas, it got lost in time, and when I tried to find it, it had disappeared. I searched my parents' apartment, but couldn't find it. One day, my father called me and told me there was an old guitar in the garage and what he should do with it. Half an hour later, I was at his place. It was the guitar. My first mom's guitar. I felt dizzy with joy. I went back to the club, plugged it into the amp, and it started playing. If you want something badly enough, eventually the wish will come true. I put my first guitar in my study, so it would constantly remind me of my youth and the beginning of my musical career. Unnoticeably, summer came. Jenya went to a youth camp for 2 weeks, then she and I decided to go to the sea. My daughter grew up and became a charming girl. Many guys turned their heads when we walked around town with her. I do not hide it was nice to me as a father, but deep in my heart I felt jealousy and sadness that the time will come and my daughter will leave me. The laws of nature are inexorable. While Jenya was away, I moved into the club and made it my new home. Things were going well. The administrator Natasha coped with her duties well, but I began to notice that her attitude toward me had changed. She was seriously interested in me. This was evident in everything. First of all, she became friends with Jenny. My daughter often came to the club to talk to Natasha. In the mornings, I was served natural coffee with homemade pastries, as I found out later. And finally, homemade cutlets appeared in my diet. I used to think that no one but my mother knows how to make burgers. But I was wrong. The cutlets that Natasha treated me to were a masterpiece of culinary art. Yes, time goes on, but the techniques of seducing men do not change. The way to their hearts is through their stomachs. Of Natasha made excellent use of this timeless feminine device. She took her time. She did not impose her company on me. She did not bore me with her talk, but I felt that I was getting more and more drawn in by the comfort Natasha was creating. One warm summer evening, I spent some time in my office. There was no hurry. The apartment was only 5 meters away. I had planned to have a drink the morning before, and the whole day was filled with anticipation of this important event for any man. I poured half a glass of amber drink and suddenly thought about Sveta. Just a thought. Her current life was indifferent to me. It was just a thought, and I immediately forgot about her. But no sooner had I enjoyed the single malt than the cell phone beeped intrusively. Honestly, I wanted to throw it against the wall. But I overcame myself and answered the phone. Hello. There was silence on the phone, but I heard someone's breathing. Hello, speak. Dimai? The woman's voice was very familiar. City? I'm listening. Go ahead. I managed to take a sip of whiskey that I had been anticipating all day for nothing. Dima, just do not hang up. I really need to meet you. Can I come over? Svetlana's voice was quiet, ingratiating, begging. Do you want to come right now? Yes, I'm begging you. Okay, come over. I'm at the club now. My ex-wife appeared in all her glory. She modest but insanely expensive dress, the expensive dress, flesh-colored stockings, shoes on stilettos, smoky glasses half-face, and completed this mind-blowing outfit hat. Sveta seemed like a model come off the cover of a glamorous magazine. Except that her face didn't look happy. She sat across from me with her head down, expressing humility and obedience. Dima, I know it's unforgivable, and yet I ask you to forgive me. There wasn't a single day that I didn't think about you. Her eyes began to fill with tears. I have done a terrible thing. I betrayed you, our family, our daughter. She told me that the love craze wasn't long enough. Her Pasha had a new fling, much younger than Svedera. Pasha lived with 2 families for a while and then offered to let Sveta move out. True, he provided with some money. Sveta was upset, but not for long. She is a new admirer, an Italian, the owner of a gas station. A mad passion flared up between them, and it seemed to Sveta that it would last forever. It did, in fact, go on forever. And for a whole month, until Sveta ran out of money. But she wasn't upset. The gas station wasn't a bad income either. But then it turned out that her Italian had no desire at all to support the beauty at his own expense. These foreigners are very greedy. So once again, Sveta was asked to vacate her apartment. And then Sveta remembered that she had a husband and a daughter. Not strangers at all. She somehow scraped together the money for a ticket, and here she was, to be reunited with her family. She continued to speak, while I stared in silence at my once beloved woman. The woman who cynically betrayed me without hesitation. The woman who had lied to me for a year, living with me and her lover. The woman who had cut me and Genyo out of her life and left me for another mayor. And now she's come to her senses and wants to come back to me. I'm sorry. She kept repeating that word, and I looked at her bright lipstick-painted mouth, which delighted my ears with such sweet words, and I imagined her kissing and caressing her lovers with it. She didn't care so much about my feelings that she didn't hesitate to tell me about her Italian love adventures, not giving a second thought to how she was killing me with her words. Did Sveta really think that I would believe her words for even a second? That she was confused, that she didn't know what she wanted? 2 years ago, she found an excuse for her meanness, and left me and her daughter without hesitation. And now she is here, not because she really realized that she loves her family, but because she understands that now she has no one to provide for her financially. After realizing all this, Sveta came to me, hoping to try to get back, was lost. Do I seem to her so stupid, ready to believe her lies? I remembered the words of Genya, 2 years ago. Daddy, I only ask you one thing. Let us remember this for life, that we will never forgive her. Svete. I interrupted her heart-rending monologue. You're an adult and chose your own path. You cannot step into the same river twice. I forgave you long ago, but I have my own life in which there is no place for you. I stood up, showing that the conversation was over. Goodbye and try to be happy. Sveta left, holding a handkerchief to her eyes. The scent of her perfume wafted through the office for some time. I finished my whiskey, put on my jacket, and headed for the door. It was time to open the club. It was rock and roll time. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.